I'd like to call this meeting to order. I would like to begin by acknowledging that we are in Treaty 1 territory and the traditional homeland of the Métis Nation. My name is Marla Billinghurst, and I will be the chair of this morning's hearing. To my left is Mr. Robert Upton, and to my far left is Mr. Richard Whitbread. To my right is the secretary for this morning, Ms. Kelsey Harrison, and the assessor for the city is Mr. Stephen Lobenstein. We will be hearing applications for revision of the assessment roll in accordance with the Municipal Assessment Act. The matters for which revision is requested have been described in each application, and we will limit discussion to those matters. The statements that applicants or the assessor make at this hearing are sworn testimony, and anyone speaking to the matters must be sworn in. Be advised that comparisons of assessments of properties are not considered evidence of market value by the Board of Revision. The Board of Revision is appointed annually by Council and is independent of it and the City Administration, and makes its decisions on the basis of the evidence provided at this hearing and issues a written order that will be mailed to all parties as soon as possible. Please note that the Board's decisions with respect to an application may be appealed to the Manitoba Municipal Board if the matter pertains to assessed value or classification, or to the Court of Queen's Bench if the matter pertains to the application of exemption from taxation. Should you wish to appeal, information on how to do so will be included with the Board's order. With respect to the hearing process, I will confirm the matters to be addressed with each applicant following the swearing in. We will then have the assessor's testimony, followed by questions that the applicant may have, and then the applicant's testimony followed by questions. Each side will have an opportunity to summarize if they wish. Once all the evidence about an application has been brought forward, the applicant may leave. The process will repeat for each item on the docket today. The session will close after all the applications have been heard and the Board will deliberate in private and make its decisions. You will receive the order by registered mail as soon as possible. As information, all public hearings are recorded and will be part of the public record.
Did you please state your name? Do you affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you. Swear in or Did you please state your name?
Trevor Smith.
And do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you.
All right, this first matter on this morning's docket will be 680 Mission Street.
The roll number is 060-530-28100, 680 Mission Street. The roll year is 2020. The reference date is April 1st, 2018, and the assessed value is $7,595,000. The actual years built are between 1971 to 1974. The construction is wood or steel framed exterior walls. The zoning is M3, heavy manufacturing. The land area is 281,848 square feet. The gross floor and the leasable area are 117,873 square feet for a land to plan of 2.43. I just want to turn to page 2. You can see there was a sale in 2005 for $3.65 million. Turning to page 8, we can just take a look at the property to get an idea of its scale and its size. It runs along Mission. There's obviously a few different buildings that have been constructed on this property. They have different addresses, but they are all the same roll number. As you can see on the lower picture on page 8. Turning to page 9, you can just get some other views from it along Mission. It's a fairly expansive property. There is not a lot of land to building ratio at 2.43. Turning to page 3, you can take a look at the rent comparables. The rent comparables have a lease start that range from 2009 up to March 1st, 2017. The lease terms range from 2 years all the way up to 19 years. The leased areas range from 95,997 square feet up to 134,664 square feet. The wall heights range from 17 feet up to 31 feet, and the overall years built range from 1968 all the way up to 1990. And the rents, they range from $4.50 all the way up to $6.53. If you turn to page 4, you can see the breakdown of the leasable areas. And the overall per square foot is $5.56 to come to a total potential rent of $655,963. We would then deduct the 5% vacancy loss, the 2% expenses, and then apply that to a 7.75% cap rate, apply it to the net operating income of $588,601 to get our capitalized value of $7,595 rounded. Turning to page 6, we can take a look at the industrial cap rates. If you look at the industrial, that's the second one down underneath office, they range from 6.34 to 7.80 in our 20th and 80th percentile. We can go as low as 5.5 or as high as 9.8 for the outlier ones. Turning to page 7 is the Municipal Assessment Act excerpt that we have. And page 10, 11, 12, and 13 have the mailer on the back, so they are compliant. We feel that the value of $7,595,000 is fair and equitable and should be confirmed. Yeah, that's it.
Mr. Smith, questions?
Yes, just before I get started, can we, just noticing this right in the eyes. I do have a number of questions, and also some rebuttal, with regard to non-recoverables. I'm not sure when and how you want to deal with that aspect.
Do you have a preference?
I don't know,
Okay.
however you guys want.
So we can just go ahead and ask your questions and then you can.
Okay, maybe I'll ask my questions first of all.
Yeah.
Yes. So there is an arm's length lease in place on the property, correct?
Correct.
And that lease is in place up until the year 2022, I believe.
I believe
Correct.
correct.
Okay. And what is the rental rate? That's
It's $4.
net rental rate? $4 a square foot.
Yeah.
Okay. In the last assessment cycle, the city had applied a net rental rate of $3.50 a square foot. We're now at $5.56 a square foot, a jump of over $2. Can you explain the logic in that?
I think it's explained in my comparables on page 3. We see similar types of properties, similar square footages, similar age, similar wall heights. These are rents that they are getting in the market.
So if you were to buy this property as of the valuation date, would you be achieving $5.56 for the next 5 years?
No, not necessarily.
Okay, so the lease in place would carry forward,
Yeah.
and that would be the income stream you would receive.
That is part of the income stream, yes, the rent, for sure.
Okay. Let's have a look at the rental comparables then on page number 3. The first one there, 1345 Redwood Avenue, that's owned by Pure Industrial REIT, is it not? And the tenant was, I'm not sure if it is now, it was Boeing Manufacturing, correct? Or,
Yeah.
so it's a very clean, high-tech facility?
Yeah, it would be a high-tech facility for Boeing,
Okay.
yeah.
And the wall height there is 22 feet across the board, right?
Correct.
The other facilities that we're looking at here are warehouse distribution facilities, are they not? So located in Inkster Park. These would all have a higher grade of industrial zoning, would they not? They would not be M3 heavy
No,
manufacturing?
they would not be M3.
Okay, so they would typically have excellent loading, higher or greater land to plant area ratio, et cetera, for the majority of these
Some
these
do.
comparables.
Yeah, without a doubt.
Okay. So I'm just, okay, that's my questions, I guess, with regard to the rent comparables. With regard to the non-recoverable expenses, I see that the expenses that are attributed by the city in this cycle are 2%.
Correct.
That's a change from an overall 7% in the last cycle and numerous cycles before that.
That's correct.
Okay. Can you explain to the board the logic behind that
Sure.
significant
Yeah.
change in valuation practice?
So, what it is he's speaking of, we took away the 5% management fee. Management fees are recoverable expenses. So they are recovered from the tenant by the landlord. So what happens is that we use net rents. So they're already being taken out. The management's being taken out, the taxes are being taken out, and the insurance is being taken out. So the owner is already recovering those. So the net rents that we use, our model rents are net of those. So we decided that we're already taking them out, so there's no need to give an extra 5% deduction, because they're already taken out of our model rent. So it's a management rent, that's what it is. So, how can I best put it? So yeah, the historical 5% management cent was an expense related to the standard management fees charged by the owner or a property manager relating to the day-to-day operations of the property. That's basically what it is. So that's why we took it out. It's already been taken out. And you also realize that in the capitalization rate, when we do our cap rate study, we're taking that out as well. So that is also changing the cap rate. It's bringing the cap rates up.
So, if I understand you correctly, then the assumption was that 5% expense allowance that was referred to as management was indeed considered to be a property management fee that the city feels was being essentially double counted. Is that accurate?
Accurate.
Okay. I do have rebuttal on that point. Set? Okay, thank you. So with regard to the change in non-recoverable allowances from the city of Winnipeg in their valuation model, and our rebuttal on that, and I'll get into this perhaps a bit more in my presentation as well, and we'll only cover it once today as it covers all properties. The city of Winnipeg has historically had two non-recoverable expense sections or expense allowances, in addition to the shortfall allowance, which is specific to the vacant space shortfall with regard to heating and lighting, etc. for that vacant space. And these were referred to as management, which was a misnomer. That was one category. The other category was referred to as other expenses. And having done this work and presented before this board for a considerable amount of time now, it's been presented by the city in the same standard manner consistently, where the other expenses were specifically attributed to structural allowance, that being any non-recoverable expense that the landlord would incur in with regard to maintenance of the structure itself that would not be allowed to be recovered from the tenant through their leases. That's very standard. And the other allowance was always referred to as management and was always 5%. That is a misnomer, calling it management, but that was what it was always termed. The history of that valuation model stretches back into the 1990s. I don't have the original documentation, as I was not active at that early date on doing these appeals. But if you look at the material presented before the board on this subject by others, you'll see that it began in the early 90s, where there were the two expense allowances that were introduced by the city in their income valuation model, and they were always the 5% management allowance and 2% structural allowance. What I presented here today is just a brief history of a couple of cycles running from 2012 right through to 2020, this being the City of Winnipeg's Assessment and Taxation Department's document entitled Valuation of Income Producing Properties. This is for the 2012, I think I have 2012, 2016, 2018, and 2020 documents here. Now, I was looking at this after bringing it in. I see that I have the office retail component for the city's documentation here. Suffice it to say, it's exactly the same with regard to this aspect for the industrial properties. There is no change in how the non-recoverables were approached. If you go through this, and we won't belabor the point, as you've probably heard this numerous times, if you flip to my page number 4 of that document, you can see how net operating income is derived. I've highlighted a section there. So we have NOI equaling the potential annual income, less vacancy and collection loss, less non-recoverable operating expenses. So that would be your shortfall, the management expense that was allowed by the city, and the other expense, which is specific to structural, as described by the city in past presentations before this board. As you go forward in the document, you flip to my page number 11, still on the 2012, you can see it refers to management, property type, all office and retail properties. Now it's identical with the industrial properties as well. And then we have 2% other expenses. So I won't go through each of the years, other than to say all of them follow the exact same pattern. The city has historically allowed this 5% allowance, and there is a reason for it. Now, I don't, again, have the documentation for this, but if you go back in time and look at what that expense was intended for, it wasn't specific to being for property management. That, again, is a misnomer as to how this expense allowance is termed. The actual intent of making that 5% allowance was for non-recoverable operating expenses outside of structural, outside of shortfall, that that any property owner will incur and not be able to recover from the tenant in a normal course of practice. We get to 2020, of course, and the 5% management allowance has been reduced to 0. Now, we have no argument with property management being recovered from the tenants. It is indeed recovered from the tenants in most leases, and that is accurate to say. The miscalculation here is that expense allowance is really not intended as a property management specific allowance. It's for non-recoverable expenses outside of structural allowance and outside of shortfall. The further documentation that we have regarding this, I'll guide you to the correct page here. And again, I have some further documentation in my brief as well, but if you look at my page number 51, the City of Winnipeg is also diverging from other assessment authorities within Canada in taking this approach with regard to the valuation pattern for income producing properties. So looking at page 51, we have a document from Ontario, the Municipal Property Assessment Corp out of Ontario, which is the body that handles property assessment in all of Ontario. We're looking here at, again, methodology guide, valuation date January 1, 2016. Now, again, this was a document that I presented for a hearing on retail, so I see that we haven't changed this. This is valuing shopping centers in Ontario. Again, trust me that the valuation model is presented in exactly the same manner for industrial with regard to non-recoverable. So the methodology holds true. If we look further into this document on page number 57, with regard to data analysis, it goes through a number of points with regard to the determination of market value. I won't run through all of the steps here, other than it says number 3, establish rents by tenant type for each class, etc., etc. Number 4, establish typical market vacancy rates for each class of property. And number 5, which is highlighted, establish typical non-recovered operating expense allowances. Moving on to page number 59, following that, establishing net operating income. We have the NOI equaling effective gross income minus non-recoverable operating expenses. So moving further on to page number 60, you can see I've highlighted non-recoverable operating expenses as noted at the top there. And some of the text that they have in this document here regarding describing the non-recoverable operating expenses. It says in a typical shopping center, tenants are on net leases, and the operating costs are collected from the tenant independent of the rent paid for the occupied space. There are typically 2 areas where the property owner has to cover expenses, rather. This being non-recoverable operating expenses, which are not passed on to the tenants, such as legal and audit fees, advertising and promotional fees. There are indeed others. And secondly, expenses associated with operating any vacant space. Now that would be your shortfall. that second point. The first one being non-recoverable operating expenses. Moving on to page 61, it just gives you an example of the NOI calculation. You can see there that they're attributing a 5% deduction for non-recoverable operating expenses. I'm not saying that's exactly the number that their model uses, but it is used in their example. Moving on to the document, which I guess would be starting on page 63. I see it's not numbered. This is from the Saskatchewan Assessment Management Agency, which of course handles assessment in the province of Saskatchewan. We have the document Market Value Assessment in Saskatchewan Handbook, and this is specific to warehouse. So if we flip to what's numbered, page number 16 in their font at the bottom of that page, refers to establishing the NOI. And I'll just quickly quote from this: the operating expenses that are not recovered are deducted from the effective gross income to obtain the net operating income from the property. Even on a net rental basis, there are unrecovered operating expenses, i.e. expenses not paid for under the operating agreements that must be covered by the owner. The effective gross income must be reduced by the total amount of these unrecovered expenses to determine the net operating income received by the owner. And it refers to, again, the same, more or less the same description with regard to non-recoverable operating expenses. The non-recoverable operating expenses that are typically not recovered from tenants under the terms of the lease are as follows. And it refers to legal and audit fees. Secondly, structural repairs and capital repairs. That structural, in our case, would fall under the 2%. Then it goes on to advertising and promotion. Point number 3. This only includes the advertisements by the management and operation of the warehouse, advertising to fill the vacant space. And point number 4 that they have in this Saskatchewan document being leasing commissions. And again, I will leave that to you to read there, but clearly they deduct leasing commissions in Saskatchewan as part of their standard model. Then they move into the vacant space shortfall, which we won't cover, as that we are in agreement on. So if you look, and I won't go through the additional calculations here, but I think on the page number 20, in the example that they give for warehouse, they're using an unrecovered operating expense of 6% allowance is what is being used in the example as presented by Saskatchewan. So that's two different assessing authorities in Canada which specifically identify operating expenses that need to be covered off in the establishment of the net operating income. The city of Winnipeg has traditionally recognized these unrecoverable operating expenses in their model as well. They have, for the 2020 cycle, seen fit to reduce the expense from an overall amount of 7% down to 2%, which is indicative only of structural allowance. It's a very significant change in valuation methodology. Doesn't follow other standard valuation practice of other assessing agencies within Canada. And in my discussion, I'll also discuss the appraisal to Canada methodology as well. That is my rebuttal on this.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Sure, questions here. So you spoke of SAMA and MPAC. This is their guideline to how they basically calculated net operating income. So you said that these are examples. So this is just an example of how they do it. So do you know the actual percentage they use for non-recoverables?
No, I don't have that specific information as I'm not doing any
So you're
branch
not-
appeals in that.
You're not relying on their examples here as evidence?
I'm not relying on their examples as the specific amount that they're deducting. It's the methodology that they are allowing
So
for the
then-
specific expenses in their valuation
Okay.
model.
So then we, in a sense, we are following what they are doing.
No.
No, okay, but it says here, you take the total gross effective income
Well-
and you deduct the total non-recoverable expenses to get the net operating income. Is that not what we're doing?
So in a sense, I suppose you could say that, but the allowance that you're allowing for is only for a very brief part of those non-recoverable expenses, and you've removed any deduction for a significant amount of the
But
non-recoverable expenses.
We've only removed the management, which is already being taken out.
Well, we're certainly in agreement with regard to property management typically being a recoverable expense other than in gross or semi-gross leases. Now, what we're in disagreement about is with regard to what that actual expense allowance was for. It was not specifically for recovering property management expense. It's a misnomer that has been carried forward and we haven't disputed.
So looking back at all of these, it always says management on it. Back into the 2012, 2014, 2016, it always says management, does it not?
It does indeed, so just with regard to that, I have some documentation that's not mine that refers to the 1994 Assessor's Valuation Procedures Manual, and in that it states the following: typical non-recoverable expenses were considered. And then it says, point number 1, management highlighted. Reflect expenses that are incurred by the landlord that are non-recoverable from the tenants, even with the net leases. These expenses involve processing payments and chasing bad debts. Now, they're particularly brief on what they're terming would be the non-recoverable expenses. If you look at the bulk of the methodology that's being used in the vast majority of other jurisdictions, as well as by the Appraisal Institute, the non-recoverable expenses are clearly itemized and are significantly more than just what is referred to here in that document. So it's not referring to management as property management expense that is obviously recoverable in most circumstances from tenants under their terms of their leases.
So this document speaks from 1994, and was that before or after we switched it to a model system? Basically.
To a model system?
Yeah, or basically to a mass appraisal system, I should say, sorry.
I'm not certain what year the city of Winnipeg switched to a mass appraisal system, but that wouldn't affect the methodology of what should and shouldn't be considered with regard to non-recoverables.
So you're stating that that was never meant to be a management fee, even though we've consistently labeled it as a management fee. Did you help create the model? Have you worked for the city?
No, I have not worked for the city of Winnipeg in any capacity in my entire career.
Okay, those are all my questions.
Okay, thank you very much. Where were we at? Going back. Okay, Mr. Upton, did you have questions for the city assessor on this presentation?
On the presentation, yeah.
Okay.
Well, to start with on this, the expenses you allow are 2%.
Correct.
And what are they to cover?
They cover all the non-recoverable expenses, so like structural repair and such.
Okay. And the city, just to refresh my memory here, the city used to allow 5%
We used to allow.
in addition to the 2%?
In addition to the 2%, yes.
And now you've eliminated that 5%.
We've
total.
eliminated that 5%, correct.
And why this sudden turn of
Well,
procedure?
I guess it was decided that we're already seeing that change. Like, we're already taking that out with our market rents, right?
But you've always done that in the past, haven't you?
Sure. And we've had different systems. In 1994, we didn't have a mass appraisal system where we used the model rent, so we changed that in 2006. So appraisal changes. It doesn't always stay the same. So we felt that this was best. This is the best to be fair and equitable to the taxpayers.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay, I guess you've explained that. Tell me about the rental on this. Now, when I look at the expense and income statements,
Mm-hmm.
the actual rent here is $490,000.
That's the rental revenue, correct?
That's the rental revenue.
Yep.
And you've got revenue of $655,000.
Yep, that is correct.
So you're saying that the rental achieved is not market.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that we have gone over this. This is an arm's length lease. It's definitely lower in the market. It's a lower one. It could be achieving a higher rent for this building, I feel. But the thing that is interesting as well, that is the rental revenue. But if you look on page 13, it's net operating income, or net income is $449,562. So
Where's that now?
that would be on page 13 of my brief.
Yeah,
It's kind of small, far right-hand column.
yeah, I got it.
Yeah, you got it? So, although yes, our NOI is higher, if we were to apply their rental rate to our model, we would come in far under their net operating income.
I see, okay. So your average rental is, I think the appellant said it's $552 or something like that?
We're at 556.
$556.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the average being achieved?
Yep.
And this is, there's no part of the space being occupied by the owner?
No, this is fully rented out.
Fully rented out, okay. Okay, and the cap rate, well, your sheet here, eh? How did you arrive at that cap rate? Just,
Basically due to the size and the age of the building, it is on the larger side. We do recognize that, the risk for that. It would be harder to lease out a building of that size or even sell a building of that size, so.
but you're at the high end.
Yeah, we're on the higher end of our model. Yeah.
Okay, good. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Whitbread?
Yeah. Did you visit the interior of the building?
I have not been to this building.
Oh, so you can't comment on the
I
condition?
can't comment on the condition.
Did you visit the exterior?
I have
Did you
driven past it,
photograph?
but no, I don't have photographs or anything.
And the condition of the exterior, in your opinion?
It's typical of the age.
Bad, good,
Good, average.
good to average? Okay. No, my other questions were answered. Thank you.
Okay, great, thank you very much. Okay, Mr. Smith,
Yes,
proceed
thank
with
you.
your presentation.
Thank you very much. So, just, I'll jump back into the non-recoverable portion at the beginning here. The issue of the non-recoverable is a very significant one. Change from 7% allowance overall down to 2% allowance is very significant. I think logically, it would be highly unlikely that the city would have made the same error in calculations in allowing for an expense that wasn't truly allowable over the course of more than a decade. If we take 2006 as being a starting point, I don't know if that's the accurate year to begin this or not. So I don't feel that, just logically looking at it, that the city would make the same 5% error on all commercial properties across the board in the city of Winnipeg over that extended period of time. Looking at it in that manner, it just strikes me as highly unlikely that would be an accurate representation of what had occurred. Looking at the subject property itself, 680 Mission Street. So there is an arm's length tenancy in place here, and the lease rate for the property running with a lease that runs through 2022. They were signed up at $4 per square foot. So if one were to acquire this property on the open market, subject to all normal conditions of sale, you would be acquiring a property with a $4 rental rate going forward in time, and that's what your return would be based on. It wouldn't be based on $5.56 a square foot. It would be based on the in-place rent going forward. That rental rate itself was struck relatively recently as well. It's not a dated lease or anything of that nature. They did have a renewal of the lease term in relatively recent time. So that is the explanation with regard to the rental rate. The tenant was in place. It's not an ideal building. It doesn't draw top end rents because of the nature of the property itself, with the issues that I'll describe. The location is certainly a factor, and we have a heavy manufacturing facility essentially zoned as such. It's zoned M3. It's located in St. Boniface, in that area of heavy industrial to the east of the Shell oil tank farm, which you can see on my aerial on page number 10. It's in very close proximity to the Loveday mushroom plant. This is the type of environment in which the property is sitting. It's not sitting in a suburban or suburban industrial park of any nature. It's heavy industrial. Looking at the property itself, if you look at my page number 3, you can see the history of the assessment for the property and how it has changed over time. It was appealed 2012 through 2016. You can see the reductions there, running from 3.9 million, moving up to 4,629,000 in 2016, reduced from 5,524,000. Was not appealed in 2018, and now we have a 55% jump, $2,691,000 increase in value, up to $7,595,000. Very significant increase. I believe the increase pretty much matches the increase in rent that has been applied by the city. Looking at the property itself, again, built in the years 1971 through 1974. It's kind of a multi-stage building that has been built in sections and added on to over time. We have a very low land to plan area ratio at 2.43 to 1. If I get you to look at my page number 11, you can see the property siting on the site itself. It has some loading available on the front of the building. The majority of the loading is located in what would be the southwest corner, I guess. There's a very narrow access point bordering the building for the trucks to circulate back into that area and offload the materials used in the manufacture in that property by Carlson. And so circulation is obviously an issue, getting in and out. It's not easy access. You're also exiting onto Mission Street, which is, again, heavy industrial. Pavement is not the best. You're looking at ditches. It's not a standard area like Inkster Industrial Park or indeed St. Boniface Industrial Park. The external influences, as I described a little bit earlier, we have the Loveday mushroom plant providing noxious fumes almost immediately next door. It does affect the area, as we all know. It also has an effect on tenants that would want to locate there and what they'd be willing to pay, obviously. Across the road, we have United Concrete, which is a crushing plant, significant amount of dust, etc. All of these influences add up to a degree of external obsolescence. If we quote the standard text of the Appraisal Institute of Canada, which is the Appraisal of Real Estate, second Canadian edition, it refers to external obsolescence as a temporary or permanent impairment of the utility or saleability of an improvement or property due to negative influences outside the property. External obsolescence may result from adverse market conditions because of its fixed location. Real estate is subject to external influence that usually cannot be controlled by the property owner, landlord, or tenant. So that has an impact on the lease rate achievable for the property as well. Looking at the building itself, this does come into play with regard to what can be achieved. Obviously, the layout is not ideal, having been built in stages. It is a structure of 122,000 square feet, but it's not how one would build a structure of that sort today. It is a mix of wood frame and steel construction. There is roughly a 50-50 split of the roof deck between wood and steel, so significantly older component of the structure as well. There is office area at the front, which has a somewhat lower level of finish, and as I described, the shipping and receiving area, there is an area at the front, but the majority of it is at the rear of the property and difficult to access. It was originally a multi-tenant building, so there is some demising that is not, again, ideal for the workflow within the space itself for a single tenant property. As described, creates significant disruptions in workflow. This is a form of functional obsolescence, again referring to the appraisal text. We have functional obsolescence as a flaw in the structure, materials, or design that diminishes the function, utility, and value of the improvement. Obviously, access to shipping and receiving is a significant challenge. The poor loading, and then there are some roofing issues that we have with a building of that size. So that's the background of it. Moving on quickly to the valuation, as we're, I think, relatively concurrent on some of the points. We use the $4 net rental rate. In doing so, we compared it to the marketplace, and you can see our comps on page number 15. These are not all heavy industrial manufacturers. Indeed, there are not a lot of M3 heavy manufacturing rents that are out there to compare it to. However, we are looking at the size and utility, age of structure, etc., in coming up with these comps. You can see that our comps, we try and keep them as close to the valuation date as we can. We're looking at a range of roughly $2 a square foot up to a high of $4.81 a square foot for these properties. We've given you the ages and wall heights and use of them. Happy to discuss them in more detail if you wish. Suffice it to say, the $4 net rent was checked against the market when they renewed the tenant, and it was a very slight bump from where they were, but they were not going to achieve more in the open market. So the $4 net rent is certainly reflective of market for the property. We have used the 5% vacancy rate in our valuation, again, checking it against the market. And if we move into my page number 17 with regard to the expense allowance, I'll just briefly cover a bit more ground than we did before. As noted, with regard to the 5% management expense allowance as termed by the city, it has been eliminated by the city. The Appraisal Institute of Canada is the governing body of the property appraisal profession in Canada, and is responsible for provision of education to its members through a partnership with the University of BC. Standard appraisal text, as described earlier, provided to students and candidate members, is the Appraisal of Real Estate, 3rd Canadian edition. And in reference to the income approach to value, it states in Chapter 21, formula for the calculation of net operating income is summarized as follows. Potential gross income minus vacancy and collection loss equals effective gross income, minus operating expenses that are paid by the landlord equals net operating income. The expenses, the reference to operating expenses paid by the landlord refers to non-recoverable operating expenses, or expenses that cannot be recovered from the tenants of a property through standard operating expense recoveries, as they're not permitted through the lease. These non-recoverable operating expenses are standard expenses incurred by a property and serve to reduce the overall NOI to the owner. Standard non-recoverable operating expenses include expense categories such as, but not limited to, the following: professional fees, that being legal and accounting and other professional fees, asset management, in some cases, we have landlord work, we have leasing commissions, we have tenant improvements, that being the cost of bringing the space up to the required level of the tenant, that being invested by the owner themselves. Owner repair and maintenance, exclusive of structural repair, marketing of the property, tenant inducements, that being free rent and any other tenant inducements, such as rent reductions, credit checks, and then in some cases, property management fees. Typically, in most cases, property management fees are recovered from the tenants. In situations where you have gross lease or semi-gross lease, particularly with government tenancies, often the property management fees are not recovered. But dominantly in the market, property management is recovered. We have gone through a study at our firm where we conducted a 3-year historical review of properties, where we had full access to year-end income and expense statements with regard to determining the percentage of effective gross income non-recoverable expenses formed on a per property basis. So our study covered the years 2016 through 2018. And on page number 18, we summarize these results in the table as shown. So along the top of the chart, we have 2 categories. We broke it into 2 as there is some dispute with regard to tenant improvements. So we have a category entitled non-recoverable expenses without tenant improvements being included. Then we have non-recoverable expenses with the tenant improvement included in the second category. Far right-hand side, we have the number of properties that we were able to fully review for each of those years. And look on the left-hand side of the chart, you can see the year that is being referred to. So the averages as presented there for those categories are as shown. So in 2018, Non-recoverables without TI, we were at an average of 9.6%, with 10.6% being inclusive of tenant improvements. 2017, 11.4% exclusive of TI, 13.4% inclusive. 2016, 13.5% exclusive of TI and 14.2% inclusive. You can see the averages at the bottom over those 3 years, 11.5% and 12.7%. Our property count, where we had full access, ranged between 45 and 53 properties over those 3 years. Now, obviously, this average, as shown, whether you include the TIs or not, is significantly above the former 5% management allowance as provided by the city in past assessment cycles. We did not dispute it. We're not disputing that amount at this point. We're simply seeking reinstitution of the 5% non-recoverable expense allowance, not to be termed management expense. So we have included the 5% as well as the 2% for an overall 7% non-recoverable expense allowance. The shortfall remains the same, and the NOI is shown on page number 19. If we flip to page number 20, we are actually in agreement on this property with regard to the cap rate at 7.75%. So you can see we presented our valuation on the left-hand side compared to the City of Winnipeg's 2020 analysis in the middle and their 2018 analysis on the right-hand side. So we arrive at a final market value of $5,297,000. The city's valuation in the middle there at $7,595,000, and their 2018 valuation at $4,904,000. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Mr. Assessor, do you have questions?
Yeah, I have some questions. Turning to your page 19, your net operating income is lower than the actual net operating income reported. Can you explain that?
The rental rate, the net rental rate, so the rent that they're achieving to rent the space out for the building is $4 per square foot. So what I'm presenting with regard on page 19, obviously we make the allowances for vacancy as well as the non-recoverables and shortfall. So there is a slight change there from what is reported, obviously.
And if you were to take out the 5% and just use the 2%, would you get closer to the actual net operating income of the building in terms of the non-recoverable expenses?
You may get slightly closer, but if you look at one building and remove it from the same valuation methodology that all buildings are treated with, and we have an issue with equity where they're not being valued on the same basis.
So that's correct. So should this not be valued with using the 2% instead of the 7% because that's how the City of Winnipeg valued all the buildings? That's the equitable part?
No, and that's the dispute that we're going through here before the board and asking for the ruling on is with regard to the non-recoverables. All, to my knowledge, the presentations by the majority of appellants are going to be very similar to what I presented with regard to that aspect.
Okay, speaking of the non-recoverables, you speak of the Appraisal Institute of Canada. Do they allow assessment management for their non-recoverables for their non-recoverable expenses, basically?
Assessment management.
Management, yeah, you have assessment management as a non-recoverable expense. Does the Appraisal Institute allow that?
I'm not seeing assessment management.
On page 18, assessment, asset management, my mistake.
Oh, asset management.
Yeah.
It's not specifically referred to in their list, but what they do describe is type of categories that are non-recoverable from tenants typically. It doesn't specifically mention asset management.
Does asset management have anything to do with the day-to-day operations of an individual building or property?
It has to do with the management of the property with regard to the financial performance of that property, not the day-to-day shoveling the parking lot, et cetera.
Right, so, but the expenses that we're allowing have to do with the day-to-day actual shoveling of the property or maintenance of the property, do they not?
I'm not entirely sure what the city is allowing for in their 2%.
That's fine. So we agree in cap. Right, speaking of your tenant inducements and so yeah, you're including leasing commissions and tenant inducements in your study of 64, how many properties, sorry? How does it state how many properties you reviewed here? So you include basically in your non-recoverable expense study, you included leasing commissions and tenant inducements?
Well, as I had stated there, we've broken it into two different classifications. So in my left-hand column, the non-recoverable expenses don't include tenant inducements or tenant improvements, rather. Not no tenant improvements. The right-hand column does include tenant improvements.
Are you aware of some of the municipal board basically cases that have ruled against including those in for non-recoverable expenses?
I am aware of them, yes.
Would you agree to them?
I would dispute it. I would certainly dispute it in some aspects, and you know it may come to that before the municipal board. What I see in those rulings is that, and for the board's information, when standard practice in the marketplace in leasing a space, whether it be retail, office, or industrial, is often there's some, very often, most times, there's renovations that are required to the actual unit that is being leased to bring it up to the spec of the tenant that is leasing it. So the owner has to provide that money in order to build the space out to the spec of the tenant. That tenant inducement is worked into the rent that is paid by that tenant. So they would say pay slightly more than if they, or they would pay a bit more than if they went in as the space was, just with no changes whatsoever. It's a financing aspect, so we'll build the space out for you, but you'll pay us this in rent to reflect what we've invested in the space. The rulings don't allow the deduction of that tenant improvement amount to bring it down to a net effective rent. What isn't specifically referred to is that non-recoverable, you've allowed the income to increase. You should allow on the other side of the ledger the expenses for that increase. So you're not just getting more money, you've provided a loan essentially that's being paid back through the rent to you for that space, and that expense has to be allowed for on the other side of the ledger.
Okay, so you said that it's basically like a loan, so how long would this loan be? Is it typically?
Over the course of the term of the lease.
And how long is a typical lease?
5 to 10 years.
10 years, okay.
15.
So you did a 3-year historic review of the properties, not a 5 to 15-year review. If you did a 5 to 15-year review, do you think your non-recoverable expenses would be different?
Well, there would be some variation, but the point in doing a 3-year history, and certainly we can go back go back further in time is we're looking at between 45 and 53 properties here. There's tenants coming and going all of the time, right? So there's going to be variability if there's tenant inducement in year one and not for the next 5 years for tenant A. But tenant C may stay in the space and not have any tenant inducement. So sure there'd be changes, but this is not non-reflective of what the actual market conditions are.
Okay, those are all my questions.
Thank you, Mr. Whitbread, do you have questions?
Just one quick one. I'm noticing a differential in the leasable area. You say 122,675 and the city says 117,873. Unless I've got that wrong. Can you comment on that? About just about 5,000 square feet.
Right, the lease is 122,675.
And you show
Maybe-
117.
Yeah, maybe we're not accounting for one of the buildings that are, one of the outbuildings on the structures that are built on the side yet. Maybe we haven't got to it yet, but this is the lease we have, or this is the leasable area we have in place at the moment, so.
Okay.
yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Upton?
Yeah, I'd just like to go back to the income statement submitted by the owner. If I read this correctly, the net operating income on the top there is 557,000 something.
That column that you're looking at on the far right-hand side was a budget number.
A budget number?
Yeah. I'm not aware of why it would be budgeted that high, but the lease is shown here on the very back of my brief. And you can see that they are indeed collecting base rent of $4 per square foot for the property. And then standard operating costs and property taxes above that. So I'm not sure what they are referring to in that specific number, but it's not real estate related, it appears.
So they haven't really submitted an income statement, they've submitted a budget calculation.
No, and the difficulty here is that it's a photocopy, so I think you have in there year-to-date actuals, which is one of the middle columns. And you have year-to-date budget, then you have year-to-date variance, and then you have the annual budget for December 2017. So
I can't read
it's just
that.
kind of fuzzed out in the black bar at the top there, unfortunately.
Is there an actual column there?
The first column says actual.
The front column, first column is the actual?
Yeah, it says, oh, sorry. If you
So-
look right there, it says actual.
I-
If you look very
see that.
closely.
That's the monthly. That's the monthly actual. The center column is the annual.
That's
Oh, sorry,
correct,
oh,
yeah.
there you go. That one's really fuzzy on my copy.
Year-to-date's the
Yeah.
center column?
Yeah, you see it? Just before year-to-date budget.
You have to turn, I can barely see it here.
So I'm not aware of how
Year-to-date
their
actuals, right there.
This column here?
Yep.
Yeah.
budget is calculated, et cetera, but the true return from the property from the rent is as presented.
So the net operating income from year-to-date actual is 565?
Again, I think this is a bit of a red herring, and I cannot explain to you why it is showing 565, but their actual rent that they collect from the leasing of the space is 490,000 as presented, and that goes forward through 2022. It doesn't change up to $5.56 a square foot.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and I have no questions either, so, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, the next matter is 101 Dawson Road North. Mr. Assessor, please proceed when you're ready.
Okay, the roll number is 060-515-5000-101 Dawson Road North. The assessed value is $1,659,000. The effective year builds range between 1980 and 2014. The wall heights range between 20 feet and 30 feet. The zoning is M3 heavy manufacturing. The land area is 131,115 square feet to gross floor and leasable area of 20,480 square feet for a land to plan of 6.40. Turning to page 2, you can see they're compliant and there's been no sales on the property. We'll take a look at the property on page 8. You can get an overhead view and a side view. If you look at the lower picture on page 8, you get an idea of why the date range from 1958 to 2014 for actual year built. The building on the left-hand side of the picture is the older one. The building on the right-hand side, the taller building with the overhead doors, is the newer one. Turning to page 9, you can get another view of the property. It's got a fairly good land-to-building ratio. As you can see, they're using the property for their manufacturing purposes. Turning to page 3, you can get a look at the rent comparables. So the rent comparables, the lease starts range from 2012 to up to 2016. The lease terms range from 4 years to 10 years. The leased areas range from 15,328 square feet all the way up to 30,000. The wall heights, they range from, we have 19 or 23 feet, sorry, all the way down. Now, on 380 Kuwaitan, we have a wall height of 11. It's actually, the majority of the wall height is 19 to 22 feet. That is a mistake. That's just the office portion, that's 11 feet. And then, of course, the effective years are from 1958 all the way up to 1979. And the net rents range from $5.26 all the way up to $7.47. Turning to page 4, you can see the income workup. We have a rent of $6.51 per square foot applied to 20,480 square feet. We have a vacancy of 5%, 2% expenses, and a capitalization rate of 7.25%. Applied to a net operating income of $120,286. Gets you an estimated value of $1,659,000. Turning to page 6, you can see the capitalization rates for the industrial. It's in the 20th to 80th percentile in a range of 6.34 to 7.80. On page 7 is the Municipal Assessment Act. Yeah, we feel that this value of $1,659,000 is fair and equitable and should be confirmed.
Thank you very much. Mr. Smith, do you have questions for the assessor?
Yes, just a couple. So with regard to the subject property, it was appealed in the last cycle, correct?
I believe so.
And reduced?
I think it was, yeah.
Okay. And I see that the net rent applied by the city has jumped almost exactly $1 per square foot. Just wondering what the logic behind that is.
I guess, again, you can look at my page 3 and see the comparables. These are rents that are for a similar type of age and square footage and lease term that they're getting.
Okay. The rent comparables on page number 3, then these are all, I'm not going to go through them point by point, but they're all either M1 or M2 zoning, are they not? So
M2.
light to general
Yeah, light
industrial?
general, yeah, absolutely.
And the subject is M3?
Yeah.
Okay. 380 Keewatin Street, that would be located right on a major thoroughfare.
Yes.
1201 Regent, that would be the same, would it not?
Yeah, that's on a major thoroughfare, yeah.
Yeah.
But at the same time, so is the Dawson Road, well, not major, but it's close to the artery.
154 Paramount, that'd be a fairly standard multi-tenant industrial building, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And that's in Inkster Park.
Mm-hmm.
69 Durand, that is in the St. Boniface Industrial Park, just off of Duggold, right?
Correct.
Okay. And the cap rate that it's applied of 7.25%. So we're looking at an M3 property in a heavy industrial area, kind of right in the middle of your 20th to 80th percentile. Would that not typically be a less attractive property on the marketplace?
Not necessarily. It's got renovations to it. It's got a good land to building ratio, which is important for M3 manufacturing. So it's got a lot of attributes that are going for it. I would say a 7.25% is fairly accurate.
Okay, those are all of my questions, thank you.
Mr. Whitbread, do you have a question?
Did you visit the property?
I have not.
We haven't, not at all.
No, never been.
So those photographs that you have in your presentation?
Those are just, these photographs are from, we have a pictometry view. We have a helicopter that flies over and takes pictures of the city. So,
Yeah. So you can't comment on the condition,
Um,
interior or exterior?
no, all I can comment is on that, that is a new build on the right there, so, well, fairly new, so.
Would you think that would be the 1980 or 2014?
Well, that'd be the 2014 for sure on the far right.
And you used a standard rent for $651 for all square feet,
Yeah, that is a model-driven rent, yes.
not allowing anything different for office space. Okay. Those are my questions, thank you.
Mr. Upton?
I don't think I have any right now. I'll defer to hear the presentation by the appellant.
Is it an arm's length tenant?
No, I don't think it, I think it's owner occupied, actually.
I believe. Or not submitted.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Thank you, that was all my questions.
Yeah, owner occupied.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Mr. Smith, please proceed.
Thank you very much. So, yes, it is an owner-occupied facility. Again, built between 58 and 2014. It's, again, kind of built in stages, with the building closest to the roadway having been built the earliest, obviously, and then extended backwards from there. With the most recent building in 2014 being the one at the very rear of the site, as shown on my aerial on the front there, that being the 30-foot section of wall height of the building itself. If you look at my page number 2, the majority of the building would fall in that 20-foot wall height, exterior wall height range, as you can see from the elevation at the bottom of page number 2 there. The yard itself for the site is gravel surfaced, not paved. It is Nelson Construction that is the owner of the property. They use it as a facility for their own use. Obviously, they have heavy equipment that requires work and cleaning. That's what the facility is for. They bring the units in, service them, etc. in their facility there. Clean their trucks where needed, and store them on the yard when they're not in use. That's the function of the facility itself. If you look at my page number 1 of my brief, you can see that in the last cycle, property was reduced at the border revision from $1,474,000 down to $1,111,000. That was based on that has then been increased to $1,659,000, a 49% jump in market value. That's not something that we would typically see on a building such as this in the marketplace. The description of the building is at the bottom of page number 1 there. Obviously, again, built in stages. We do have pictures of the
interior of the building as well. It's fairly standard, fairly standard concrete block facility for the most part, with the exception of the rear building built in 2014, which is a steel structure. You can see a very industrial kind of office area as shown, not certainly not higher end. So our challenge is putting a fair rental rate on a facility such as this. Again, it's zoned M3. It's located in the heavy industrial area of St. Boniface. We're not talking St. Boniface Industrial Park here, etc. While it does have just under 6, or rather just under 7 land to plan area ratio, it's somewhat irregular in layout. As you can see, it's narrow on the front, widens out at the back, with the building itself bordering the west hand or northwest hand side of a section of the property with kind of an L-shaped jog back to the rear there. So not not your standard rectangle or square with regard to layout and access to all portions of the property, and or if it were to be converted to other use, it's not ideal in that sense. And at under 7, it's not at the 8 land to plan area ratio that one would typically seek in the modern day. Moving on to valuation. So heavy industrial building used as such amongst other heavy industrial users. The rental rate that can be achieved for a facility such as this in a location such as this is what we need to determine. So looking at page number 12, we present our rental rate study as shown. It is challenging to find M3 rents in the marketplace in these areas, as very often they're owner-occupied buildings. So what we have is the rental rates as shown here. We try to have similar size and age of structure, wall heights, use. That's not always possible. You can see our range there is from $4.90 up to a high of $6.25 a square foot. The $6.25 a square foot is essentially a warehouse showroom where they're marketing their product out of on Shepherd. The bulk of the rental rate ranges that we're showing there are for M2 zone property in more standard industrial M2 areas, Inkster, etc., Omans Creek. And they're dominantly falling in that $4.90 to $5.25 a square foot range. Looking at the subject property, at least half of it is of an older vintage, 20-foot wall height. It is heavy industrial, gravel surface lot, a bit of an odd layout. We've applied a $5 rental rate, reflective of these qualities. 5% vacancy has been applied. The overall expense allowance of 7%, as discussed earlier. And the shortfall allowance, we've applied $3.60 a square foot for the subject property. Moving on to cap rate. On page number 16, the commercial brokerage houses in Winnipeg, national commercial brokerage houses, Colliers and CBRE, they quote capitalization rate ranges for investment grade property of 6.5% to 7.25% for Colliers, 6% to 7.25% for CBRE. Again, representative of investment grade properties. So you'd be looking at standard multi-tenant and or high-grade single-tenant buildings in better industrial locations with good access, good loading, etc. Something that a higher-end investor would be seeking. So this certainly does not fall within that range. We're looking at an M3 zone property, certainly a dirtier use, that being heavy industrial, cleaning of the, and storage of these Nelson River machines, etc. Certainly a less attractive area, being M3. And there is the potential for greater risk with it being a single tenant or single occupant building as well. So looking at this, we would apply a cap rate of 8% to a property such as this, which gives us a market value of $1,085,000. If you look at page 16, it summarizes our market value, the City of Winnipeg's 2020 valuation, and then their 2018 valuation to the right-hand side of that. You can see the significant, should be 2% in the middle there, my mistake. You can see the significant change that has been placed on the property by the increase in rental rate as well as the reduction in non-recoverables. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Assessor, questions from Mr. Smith?
Sure. Just first turning to your page 12, your rent comparables. Do you have one in particular you think would be the best comparable for this property?
Not specifically, no. And again, the challenge is having heavy industrial lease rates for M3 properties in a similar location. They're extremely few and far between. We do have the $4 rental rates at 680 Mission, but I would, it's almost 5 times the size, so I wouldn't consider that to be a direct comparable. But generally, the range that is being framed is in that $4.90 to $5.25 range.
Okay. Looking at 11 or the Sherwin and the Bent Hall, I pulled the rent rolls, and they're actually reporting rents for Sherwin at $6.50 and Bent Hall at $5.65 per square foot, not the reported $5 and $4.90 per square foot. Can you comment on that, or?
I can. I don't have them with me today, but they were verified at the time, and as of the term that is presented there, that was what the
Just
the
for
rents were.
verification, would you like to look at them, just to?
Yeah, I would certainly like to look at them.
Okay, great. Thank you.
So this is the 1151 Sherwin. Right, so you're looking at a different lease term here, and that being the difference.
Is mine more recent, or?
Yours is indeed more recent, and I did not have access to that material. Again, this is a warehouse, standard warehouse property in a much better location. The second property, which one are we looking at here?
Big Bent Hall?
15810. So they had a bump in rent, I guess, over the course of their term, by the looks of it, up to $5.65. So yes, that's good information to have, certainly.
Sure.
I don't always have access to
That's
this
fair,
whole.
yeah. It's not so all my questions for the rent, all my questions for the rent comparables. So looking at your cap rates, introduced brief description of cap rates by Kohlers and CBRE, and they're between 6.5% and 7.25%, and you went with 8%, basically saying that this is not an investment grade property because it's M3. Is
Not specifically because it's M3, but because of the use of the property, the location of it, the dirtier use, the area itself that drives lower rents for properties such as this.
Okay, so you kind of said, just going back to the Mission one, 680 Mission, you commented on similar things about that property, but they're owned by Oakcast Incorporated. Is that an investment firm?
That is an investment firm, yes.
So these properties do get invested by investment firms?
On occasion, so there's it's uncommon, but it's obviously driven by the stability of the tenant. And the tenant at 680 Mission Street is Carlson Manufacturing, and they are involved in the production of essentially carbon fiber, agricultural componentry. They have a very stable business that's likely to go on for some time. So they have multiple locations as well. So investment in a firm like that is very bankable, whereas
Sure. So do you know when they?
situations are very different.
Okay, so did they purchase the 680 Mission with that tenant in there, or did they attract that tenant?
I'm not sure when they purchased the building specifically.
Okay. And those are all my questions.
All right, thank you. Mr. Woodbridge, do you have questions?
No, I'm fine, thank you.
Mr. Upton?
Yeah, just looking at your rent comparables, none are in the area of Dawson Road, right?
Let me just flip to that there. You're probably right there, I'm sure, and again, that speaks to the challenge of getting heavy industrial rental rates in the marketplace. They're dominantly owner-occupied in the market, so finding good comps for that specific use is a bit challenging.
Okay. Are any of these manufacturing facilities?
No, these ones are not specifically manufacturing, they're dominantly warehouse. Again, I didn't feel it was appropriate to present the 680 Mission as it's 122,000 square feet, and we're dealing with 20,000 square feet here.
Okay. Well, I don't think I have anything else, just for the assessor, back to your rent comparables. Yours are in the basic area of Dawson, some of them are here in Dawson.
Some are, yeah, not all of them, no.
Okay. Any one of those you rely on?
We don't rely on just one, no. No,
Just
it's,
the- Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I think we're just gonna take a short break. All right, we will reconvene, and the next matter up is 400 Turin Street. Mr. Assessor, please proceed.
roll number 060320702000, 400 Turin Street. The assessed value is $1,702,000. The effective year of built from 1987 to 1999 with a wall height of 16 to 17 feet. The zoning's M3, heavy manufacturing. The land area is 55,395 square feet. With a gross floor area of 18,202 square feet, a leasable area of 17,770 square feet, and a land to plan of 3.10. Turning to page 2, they are compliant and there is no sales history. We'll take a look at the property on page 8. Good idea of the location. It's between Dougal and Marion, just off Panet Road, in the St. Boniface area. Further down page 8, you can see a picture of the property. It is a multi-tenanted property. It has access to Panet and Turin Street, as you can see from the overhead view. Turning to page 9, you can get a better idea of the look of it, some of the overhead doors it has. Basically, the height looks like 445 there, or the same height with the new addition a little higher on the side of 400. Again, page 10 is just another view. They also seem to have some storage, outdoor storage for boats and such. Turning to page 3 here, we can get a look at the rent comparables. What I did with the rent comparables is try to sort of bracket the square footages on page 4. So they're gonna range from, I guess, 528 square feet all the way up to almost 5,000 square feet. So the actual ranges I found were between 1,300 square feet all the way up to almost 5,000 square feet. The lease starts range between 2012 all the way up to 2017. The lease terms range from 1 year all the way up to 6 years. And the wall heights range all the way from 14 to 22 feet. The effective year built ranges from 1975 all the way up to 1987. And the net rents range from $7.50 per square, or $7.49 per square foot, all the way up to $8. So turning to page 4, you can see why I bracketed that way. This is how the city has them broken down for the different premises for the multi-tenanted building. The average rent of all of them is $7.66 per square foot to get a potential rent of $136,100. We apply a 5% vacancy, 2% expense, and a 7.25% capitalization rate to get a value of $1,702,000. So again, turning to page 6 and looking at the industrial category, between the 20th and the 80th percentile, our cap rate falls between there. Page 7 is the municipal assessment excerpt, and on the back there is the mailer. You can see the different rents for the mailer. They are considered net rents, but I would like to point out the lease status on these are 1990, 1994, 1987, so they wouldn't really be considered market leases, would be the opinion of myself. So we feel that the assessed value of $1,702,000 is fair and equitable and should be confirmed.
Thank you. Mr. Smith, do you have questions for the assessor?
Yes, just a couple. The capitalization rate used in this property is 7.25%, correct? And that was the same capitalization rate that was used on 101 Dawson Road?
Yeah, that is correct.
Okay. Looking at the talked about the start dates. So those, I'm looking at your page number 13 here. So we have essentially one tenant there from 1990 that would be the owner occupier, I believe. 1994, certainly renewed since that time. Then we have 2006, 2010, et cetera.
Yeah.
Okay. Looking at the rental comps, so the subject property, again, zoned M3, heavy industrial, not the same servicing as say an industrial park, like St. Boniface or Inkster, would that be fair? Sewers, et cetera?
They have sewers and water, right?
No.
They don't, there's no sewer water for this property?
They have water, there's no, it's ditch drainage out front, et cetera. There is sewer, but you're looking at significantly different servicing for an area such as this.
Sorry, I'm just, like, when we talk about service, so they have sewer, they have water, they have electrical. They
Well,
have
yes, all
heat.
properties.
Okay,
Say
right.
typically have that.
Yeah.
What I'm referring to is.
So they have a ditch.
And I'll get into that one.
Okay, sure.
Looking at the comps on page number 3. So again, M3 zone property, I'm looking at the properties here, and we have, the first one is either M1 or M2, second one is M1, then we have C3,
Sorry, I have 854 Marion is M3.
854 Marion?
Yeah, the top one.
Okay, and that would be Marion Business Park and their quasi-office tenancies in there for the most part, are they not?
It's similar to this property, I guess, in the sense of multi-tenant property also, M3. Maybe not office space, but.
Okay. Okay, let's go through them then. Number 2 there, 1333 Aqua, that would be kitty corner to the Mint, it would be on the northeast corner of Lagimodiere and Fermor.
Yeah.
Kind of set in behind multi-tenant facility. Would that be the dance studio that's indicated there at $7.50 a square foot?
No, actually, it's a fire safety company.
Okay, but that would be the kind of grade of tenancy that one would see in that building, correct? There is a dance studio there?
Yes, I guess so.
Okay. And that's zoned M1, 1051 Thomas, this is located just south of, just off of Nairn, right close to Lagimodiere, correct?
Correct.
C3 zoning?
Yeah, C3.
921 McDonald, C2 zoning, I think that's a thrift store, is it not?
McLeod, yeah. See, the interesting thing about McLeod though is it does back onto a bunch of M3 zoning.
Probably backs onto the furniture parks, I believe, correct, yes. 1500 Regent, that's quasi mall, I believe, right, C3 zoning, commercial corridor?
C3, yep.
Fronts right on Regent, we have a paint store, an insurance outlet, an eye care facility, those would be the tenancies.
Okay.
Again, 915 McLeod, office and retail, C2 zoning.
Yeah, but similar backs onto Furniture Park, which is major manufacturing.
And the final one is located in the St. Boniface Industrial Park built-up area, right? M2 zoning?
Yep.
Good loading, from what I could see.
Yep.
Okay, those are my questions, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Whitbread, do you have a question?
Mhm. So the property is owned by SMCJ Investments Limited,
Yep.
according to your note.
Yep.
There appear to be, I'll ask the question, are there 7 different tenants?
From looking at the mailer, it appears there are, yes.
And what is the range of work done by those tenants? Do you have any idea?
Well, it says on the mailer what they do.
Is it all back there?
Yeah. Key breeze, boat
I could
tops,
read
yeah.
it, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
I'll look at that.
Sure.
Jump to my next question. Did you visit the site?
I have not, no.
So you don't know what the condition is?
No.
Okay. And your rents on page 4 as listed are model driven, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you, that's all my questions.
Mr. Upton, do you have any?
Right now, thank you.
No, I have none either. Okay, thank you, please proceed.
Great, thank you very much. So, 400 Turenne Street, it is owned by, as noted there, the SMCJ Investments Limited. As an investment, they are also an occupant in one of the units. So that would explain one of the dates going back considerably in time to the beginning of the beginning or close to the beginning of the structure itself. I'll get into the rest of that when we get there. Property is zoned M3, 1.3 acres, built between 87 and 89, dominantly with one section added on in 1999. The wall height is, for the vast majority of the property, 16 to 17 feet on the exterior. And the buildings, there are 2 on site. You can see some of the pictures of them. The property itself fronts on Turenne as the main address. It does also have frontage on Panet. Panet is obviously paved. It is a heavy industrial area, so it's very very well utilized, we'll say, in terms of the condition of the roadway itself. Terrain is a gravel surfaced street. As I was indicating before, the drainage in the area is not to a sewer system. You have ditches that provide the drainage in the area, which can be problematic. There's a few photos of that, I think, in the area. So certainly not the same level of servicing or attractiveness that one would find in your standard industrial park within the city of Winnipeg. Looking at the structure itself, again, we have some photos for you on the exterior there. The majority of the units have a small front office area that's very vintage of its day, we'll call it. Sometimes it's difficult to convey this in the photos that we show, but suffice it to say that the majority of them have very dated flooring and other improvements in terms of the T-bar ceiling, lighting, etc. Then we have, obviously at the back, you have the production and or warehousing areas for the tenants themselves, one of them being a boat repair and manufacturing type of facility where they create tarps, etc. for them. The others are all dominantly involved in industrial production of some variety with some degree of warehouse as shown. The description of the property, page number 8, again, total area of just under 18,000 square feet, 16 to 17 foot wall height. Certainly not a height that drives a lot of rent in today's market. This is under height as far as being able to fully utilize the warehouse to a good capacity, drives a lower level of tenant and a lower rent. There's obviously a mix within the city servicing the various grades of companies that are out there. 16 to 17 feet is not going to drive the rent that you would get in a more modern facility. The interiors, as described, there's loading doors that are at the rear of the units themselves, gas-fired heaters, and roof-mounted HVAC for the office areas. Now, the HVAC units are original to the date of the building, and essentially all require immediate replacement. The AC, from what I understand, is not working in the majority of them, and they're going to have to invest in replacing all of these units in the near future. The roofing itself is also original. They've been doing patchwork, but it's at the point where they're also going to need to replace the roof for the facility as well. Foundations for the larger of the two buildings, the westernmost building on site, has considerable shifting as shown in the photos, and this has caused damage to the footings of the buildings as well as shifting of the exterior walls themselves, causing damage to the exterior cladding of the building, etc. This would be another significant expense that an owner would have to incur on this property itself. Let's move on to page number 10 and location. So the subject property is shown there with the dots, 400 Turenne Street. It's located in the very heavy industrial zoning area of St. Boniface. It's located in very close proximity to both Maple Leaf Foods rendering plant, as well as the Rothsay Canada meat byproducts processing plant. The noxious fumes from these two area residents are very significant and cause a large degree of external obsolescence for the subject property. They, in the summertime, have a real challenge with keeping their doors open because of the fumes from these two locations traveling in their direction the majority of the time. Obviously, that has an impact on the desirability of the building for tenants as well. So you have a building with low ceiling height with that external influence on it as well. So let's move on to the valuation approach itself. The leases are not from 1990. Obviously, they've been updated over time. They are not one-year annual leases. They're on longer-term leases of between 3 and 5 years, is my understanding. The owner themselves is in a unit that's 4,113 square feet, as shown on page number 13. We have attributed the top rent that they're achieving in that property of $5.50 to their unit that they occupy. The other rents, as shown there, range between $4.88 up to the $5.50 a square foot. So on average, it comes to $5.23 with their fully occupied rent. Looking at our sale, or rather rent comparables, presented at the bottom of the page, these are all multi-tenant industrial facilities. The majority of them are not M3, as it's difficult again to find similar rents out there in the marketplace. What we tried to find were rents of a similar size, multi-tenant, with perhaps some challenges in leasing, driving rental rates, and obviously lower ceiling heights that would be reflective of this. So the rents we show there range from 2015 through 2018. They run between $4.75 up to $5.25, as shown. The ceiling heights are shown for you, as well as the ages. Certainly framing the fact that the rents that are being achieved in the subject property are supported by market rents out there in the market by similarly challenged properties. Pardon me. So we have used the in-place rental rates plus the $5.50 for the owner's unit itself as reflective of market. 5% vacancy has been applied, as well as the overall expense allowance of 7%, and $3.75 a square foot for a shortfall. Looking at capitalization rate, the subject property, we have the same ranges as quoted by the major commercial brokerage houses in Winnipeg of a national basis of 6 to 7.25 and 6.5 to 7.25 for investment grade industrial assets. Again, this would fall outside of that range for a number of reasons. Look at the location of the property, the type of tenancy that they have. They're all very small local tenants that tend to come and go on a fairly regular basis. You have the external obsolescence caused by the location in close proximity to noxious fume producers, which will not be leaving in any recent time frame, certainly. And overall lower ceiling height, as well as the deferred maintenance that was referred to. We've applied a cap rate of 7.5% for this reason. These reasons, and that gives us a final market value of $1,050,000. I'm open for questions.
Sure.
Please proceed.
Okay, so looking at page 13 of your rent comparables, are any of them in close proximity to the subject property?
No, and again, that is the challenge, as I think you probably experienced in the rent comparables that were presented by the city there.
The rent comparables that are shown, we try and make them as comparable as possible, so you can have other areas that, or other properties that are similar in nature to the subject, just not in close proximity.
So, and then are any of the properties zoned M3?
No, we do not have M3 zoning for these properties, and again, having an M3 zone, multi-tenant, small bay industrial is very rare in the Winnipeg marketplace.
So you were unable to locate any M2 or M1 zoning properties within the proximity of the subject property?
I did not have access to ones that would be comparable. Certainly, we have rental comparables from the St. Boniface Industrial Park, which is really not comparable to the subject property.
So speaking of, you talked a lot about the fumes and the gases and the smells of the area. My rental comparables are much closer proximity to the subject property. Would you say that they would get those same fumes and gases?
Well, let's look at that. So we have one property here, that being the Marion Business Park one, 854 Marion, that I would term to be in close proximity to the subject. The others wouldn't be particularly close. Again, we're talking about Regent Avenue, McLeod, the base being St. Boniface Industrial, which I don't consider comparable directly to this one.
So you don't feel any of those properties would?
No, 854 Marion, great comp if it was similar in nature, but it's really not. You're looking at multi-tenant strip mall there that's significantly bigger in size, has multi-buildings, I believe, and many of those tenancies are somewhat office-y or office heavy in nature.
Okay. So this property you don't consider to be investment grade even though it's being leased out?
Well, so, and we always run short on time. I didn't bring the particular studies in the background that goes into what's quoted by the commercial brokerages and what they provide there, but by considering an investment grade, they're considering more higher end local and or national interest properties where you have good quality long-term tenancies, more modern structure, good locations with access and loading and all of those things. Certainly this is an investment property, but it would not meet the criteria that would fall within those.
Those are all my questions.
quotes.
Thank you. Mr. Whitbread?
I think I'm fine, thank you.
Mr. Upton?
Yes, you use the actual rents of the tenants, except for the one occupied by the,
Correct.
and you applied 550 to
I did.
the owner's space.
That's right.
And these are very old leases, some of them, aren't they?
No, they're not. So again, you have the city asking ownership, and this is self-managed, this property. It's not managed by Stevenson or another third party. So you're asking them to report on the city's very regimented form. So the original lease for some of the tenants may go back to that time period, but they're not on their original lease. They have renewed perhaps several times since then, and they're all typically on 3 to 5 year leases.
Okay, when it says lease start, that means the original lease way back.
Right, right,
Okay.
and one of them would be.
So they're
as well.
generally updated leases?
They are, yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Can I just add a question to that, just make me think of something? Sure, just about the leases, so they're updated, they didn't update the years, but did they update the actual rent?
Yes.
Okay. Another question.
I have no questions. Thank you. Okay, the next property is 770 Bradford Street. Mr. Assessor, please proceed.
I didn't receive a brief from the appellant for this one though. So should we,
We don't appear to have one either.
That's correct.
Okay.
they'll proceed?
Yeah.
Okay. The roll number is 0756016740. Address is 770 Bradford Street. The assessed value is 1.629 million. The zoning is M2 General Manufacturing. The land area is 53,559. The gross floor area is 15,550 square feet. The leasable area is 15,340 square feet for a land plan of 3.44. They are compliant. There is no sales history. We turn to page 8. You can get an idea of the location of the property. 770 Bradford is in the St. James area. It's by Wellington Avenue and Century Street. Page 9, you get an aerial view of it. You can see it has access to Bradford Street. Below you can see another side view, the parking lot and the access they have. And page 10 gives you a few more side views of the property. Turning to page 3, you can see the rent comparables. The rent comparables range from 2012 to 2017. The lease terms range from 4 years to 10 years, and the leasable areas range from 10,000 all the way up to 19,500. The average wall height ranges from 12 feet up to 21 feet, and the effective years built range from 1957 all the way up to 1975, and the rents range from $7 all the way up to $9.09 a square foot. Turning to page 4, you can see we have applied $8.06 to a leasable area of 15,340 square feet to get a potential rent of $123,640. We applied 5% vacancy, 2% expenses, and a capitalization rate of 7% for an overall value, estimated value of $1,629,000. Turning to page 6, you can see it falls within the 20th and the 80th percentile for our capitalization rates. Page 7 is the Municipal Assessment Act excerpt. We feel that the value of $1,629,000 is fair and equitable and should be confirmed.
Thank you, Mr. Smith.
I have no questions.
Okay. Mr. Whitbread.
No questions.
Mr. Upton.
I don't have any, no.
Okay, Mr. Smith, please
So-
proceed with your presentation.
My presentation involves looking at page number 4 of the city's brief. And again, it's regarding non-recoverables. I'm in agreement with the valuation parameters applied, aside from the lack of applying the 5% non-recoverable expense amount. So if you apply 5% allowance to the effective gross income, you get a deduction of $5,935. Adding that to the other deductions there gives you a net operating income of $110,385. Capped at 7% gives you a market value of $1,577,000. And we're just seeking equity across the board in all of these valuations. If it's applied to one, it should be applied to all of them.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Assessor, do you have questions?
Do you agree that we apply 2% across the board to all properties?
Yes, and that's what's in dispute.
Okay. Would you agree that's fair and equitable to apply 2% across the board?
I would not agree. Okay.
All my questions.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Whitbread?
No questions.
No questions.
No questions. Okay, thank you. Next matter is 125 Furniture Park. Mr. Assessor, please proceed when you're ready.
Um, 0400287500, address is 125 Furniture Park Road. The assessed value is $9,787,000. It's considered light manufacturing. The zoning is, M2 general manufacturing. The land area is 300,694 square feet for a gross floor area of 215,085,000 square feet, and the land to plan is 1.45. Turning to page 2, they are compliant, there is no sales history. We'll turn to page 8. Again, an overview of this building. It is very, very large, of course. It takes up pretty much the whole plan area. There's very little land to building ratio. It is a manufacturing building with lots of overhead doors for distribution and of the products. I guess we'll turn to page 3, and you can see the rent comparables. The rent comparables, the lease terms range from 2008 all the way up to 2017. The terms range from 2 years up to 19 years. The leasable areas range from 228,000 all the way up to, from 228 all the way down to 100,285 square feet. The wall heights range from 19 all the way up to 34. The effective year builds range from 1964 up to 1988, and the rents range from $3.15 per square foot up to $5.20 per square foot. So we're basically applying $3.41 to the area, except for 960. This is on page 4, sorry. Except for 960 square feet at $843 for office space. So we get a potential rent of $738,072. We're applying a vacancy of 2.5%, expenses of 2%, and an overall capitalization rate of 7%. You can see in our cap rate study from the 20th to 80th percentile, it falls within that area on page 6. 7 is the Municipal Assessment Act, and we feel this value should be confirmed at $9,787,000 and is fair and equitable. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Mr. Smith, any questions?
Yes, just looking at the vacancy applied here. The last number of properties that we looked at here were 4 and 5% vacancy allowance.
Yeah.
The subject here is 2.5%. Can you explain the difference there?
I think these large properties are typically owner occupied. They don't really have much vacancy in them. These ones in particular, they're all owner occupied. They have no vacancy, so I don't think that rate's overall incorrect.
So you're saying they have no vacancy, so in other words, they fully utilize the entire building all of the time? Is
From my understanding is, yeah, they're owner occupied and they utilize the building.
Okay, but you haven't walked through this particular one, I don't.
This particular one, no, I haven't. I have walked through, so Furniture Park Road, they have manufacturing each side of this road. I've inspected one side of the road. I haven't had a chance to inspect the other side of the road. They were definitely utilizing the vast majority on one side, so.
That is a different ownership group, correct?
I believe it says it's a different ownership group here, yeah, than the other one, but.
Okay. If, I'll deal with that in mind. The page number 3, just with regard to the comps, so 1370 Sony Place, that would be modern high cube warehouse, 34-foot, all height, excellent loading and access off of McGilvery, correct, in southwest Winnipeg, kind of a premier lease, I believe.
It's a good lease, yeah.
Yeah, that would be Brewers Distributors, I think.
That is correct.
That particular one. And they're achieving 422 in their space.
For
228,000.
228,000, yeah.
There's a couple we've looked at already, I guess. Mission, they're at $4 a square foot. The second property at 110,000 square feet at 442, that would be Penner International Trucking, I believe, is that correct? Again, modern,
This one's.
31-foot wall height.
Sorry, you're talking about feet?
Yeah, 1155.
Yeah,
Sorry.
yeah, 31-foot wall height, yeah. That's not.
That's a warehousing facility.
That is correct.
Okay. In the cap rate study that the city did, and there's probably no direct way for you to answer this, so I apologize ahead of time, but how many 200,000+ square foot manufacturing buildings would be included in that cap rate study?
That I can't answer, but I think, like myself, that there are very few over
Right.
that size.
And I apologize, but I have to ask the question, so I believe the answer is none.
Well, if you don't mind, just give me a second here, I can check one thing. I can distribute this. This will be on the back of our briefs from now on. Unfortunately, I made this one, but obviously wasn't there yet. So if you don't mind, I could distribute this, and it does show that there is one capitalization rate here that is over 100,000 square feet that we use.
Sure, be happy to see it. What is the property?
The property? It would be 1100 Waverly Street.
1100 Waverly. Do you recall the tenancy in that?
I do not have who the tenant is, no. This wasn't, again, this is
Okay.
evidence, we don't have to, but.
That's fine.
Yeah, it will be on our briefs from here on out, so.
Okay. All right, those are all of my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Whitbread?
I think I heard you say you didn't visit,
This one I did not visit, no.
so I can't comment on the condition.
No, I cannot.
Okay, no, that's fine. No other questions for the assessor.
Mr. Upton?
Not for me right now, thank you.
None for me.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Mr. Smith?
Okay, 125 Furniture Park. So this property is owned as indicated by 6152457 Canada Limited. This is the Fair Furniture family. They're not the same people that own the properties on the other side of Furniture Park Road. It is a different entity, different people, not, neither one is involved in either part, so there is no relation between the sides of the road there, just to clarify. Bit of background on 55 and 125 Furniture Park. They are a single property. It has been split into two roll numbers. I imagine my indication previously has been that this was based on the 125 Furniture Park being built more recently and being of a more considerable size. The DeFair Furniture family bought the parcel of land and originally started obviously closer to the frontage, not on Furniture Park, but on Gateway. So that's where their original building was built. I will just quickly give you that background here. It's a lengthy document, so just give me a moment if you could.
The the property, the overall property was built in multiple stages. We'll get into 55 furniture when we get to it, but overall there are roughly 19 or 20 individual building sections that the property has itself. The majority of those are on 55, and again, as described, they built their original building, were successful, continued developing the property as their company got larger, so they would add on to the building going back. What this has led to, given the configuration of the land that they have, is a very long building that consumes the majority of the site, and is very choppy internally with demising, etc. You have different roofing, differing wall heights, differing construction materials, etc. You would never go out and build a building of this size in this fashion today, but given the history of the building, the development, that is what they have. So while we have one building here, 125 Furniture Park of 215,000 square feet, and 55 Furniture Park being 249,000 square feet roughly, in reality what we have is a single building comprising nearly 500,000 square feet. They are adjoined. The workflow runs from 55 Furniture into 125 Furniture. Obviously not in an ideal way, but that is the structure of the property itself. So while it's divided into two different roll numbers, the reality is that we're looking at a facility just under 500,000 square feet in total. So the number of those facilities in Winnipeg is very, very low, as is the number of occupants and or tenants that one might find to either buy or lease space of that size. So, pardon me, just looking at my page number 3 of 125 Furniture, you can see the appeal history of this. We have 2014, we had an original valuation of $6,738,000, now reduced at the municipal board down to $6,157,000. 2018 was appealed, no reduction gained at the municipal board, and we are awaiting scheduling at the municipal board for that property. And now we're looking at a 34% increase from that level that was not reduced in 2018, $2.5 million increase roughly, certainly beyond what the market would support for a property of this size and this build out, etc. Looking at the bottom of page of that chart, we have a land to plan area ratio of 1.39 to 1. That's exceptionally low. What it has led to, obviously, is loading is not ideal at this property, as well as parking for staff for the facility as well is quite challenged. They do have loading fronting out onto Furniture Park itself, but it compromises their on-site parking as well. So certainly 1.39 to 1, exceptionally low land to plan area ratio, leading to challenges with loading, etc. Looking at the bottom of page 3, and this is an important part that we won't have dealt with already today. It's a very large-scale industrial manufacturing building. Developed for furniture manufacturing. As mentioned, it's larger
Forms part of the larger complex of the two buildings. It's one single owner occupant that uses both buildings with the workflow traveling between them. As a legal entity, it is a single legal title encompassing both buildings. And portions of the property could not be sold individually without a legal subdivision of the property, which is not what we're assessing here today. It's not what the property can become, it's what the property is. Looking at the Municipal Assessment Act, defines assessable property as real property, including the right interest in an estate held in real property. Under the section real property, defines land and improvements as an interest held in land or an improvement, air, subsurface, or surface rights or interests in land. Moving on to page number 4, and this is the crux of what I'm getting at in providing this text. Under a single legal title, the fee simple estate ownership covers the whole property. In addition, under Part 3, Administration, Section 13.1, amending assessment rolls under the Municipal Assessment Act, it says, where in a year for which a general assessment under subsection 9.1 is not required, B, by reason of an error or omission in an assessment roll entry, it describes the various things there. City of Winnipeg Charter Act has the following definition of parcel. Parcel means the total of all contiguous land described in a single certificate of title. So we have a single certificate of title for both properties, 55 and 125 furniture. According to this background that I've just provided you, we should be assessing a nearly 500,000 square foot property rather than a 215,000 and a 250,000 square foot property. As this is how it's currently assessed, we are proceeding on this basis, but really what we're valuing is the property as a whole, as it should be. So, that into account as we move forward. So, subject property 125 furniture was built between 1982 and 1999. In saying that, that's slightly misleading. There was 1,000 square feet added in 1999 with the remainder of the building built in 1982. 24-foot wall height for the vast majority of that space as shown on page number 10. The build-out is described there, and again, 24-foot wall height is what we're looking at. The site itself, it's located at the rear of Furniture Park. The only access to that property is via Furniture Park presently. The land to plan area ratio, as noted, was 1.39 to 1. This definitely limits their on-site loading and staging as well as on-site parking. Property location on page number 12, it's a little bit, it is in that small industrial area comprising largely Furniture Park, just off of Gateway and Raleigh, and the Cadonans there, as indicated. Let's move on to the valuation of the property itself. Forgive me again, this is material we haven't covered, so I'll quickly go through it. We're looking at a very large-scale, single occupant tenant industrial property, and this comes with its own challenges with regard to valuation. It's not like looking at small bay multi-tenant industrial where there's a lot of comparables out there with which to value the properties. The mass appraisal model used by the city, again, relies on the material submitted to them. There being very few tenants of this size, multiple regression analysis can certainly be prone to error on properties of this nature in predicting rental rates, vacancy rates, operating expenses,
NOI and cap rates. As noted already, there's exceptionally few properties that trade of a significant size, certainly in the 500,000 square foot range and or two. So looking at these factors on page number 14, what are they that affect the valuation of these large-scale industrials? It is size and function of the property. It is important to consider that size in itself tends to classify the property as special use because it narrows the number of users and or purchasers. Plant is frequently designed specifically for one particular tenant and is essentially a special purpose building, as would be the case here. Pardon me. Secondly, we have functional obsolescence. The single-user distribution or manufacturing buildings of such a large scale are typically operated strictly for the benefit of the owner, generally, and or the tenant. In fewer cases, they have definite material or workflow patterns in mind when the building is built. And they are laid out to service that particular occupant and or owner. Typically, this workflows vary significantly between tenants of this size, even within the same industry. So you can have a substantial level of functional obsolescence inherent even in a newly constructed property. This is evident when a new user acquires a property and demolishes the building components. So for the overall property, as noted, we have a non-ideal workflow already for them because of the development of the property over time and the narrow nature of the site that they're on. The third component that we're looking at would be limited arm length rental potential. So again, we're looking at just under 500,000 square feet in total, or 215,000 and 248,000 if you break it up. Very, very few tenants of this size, particularly in a secondary market such as Winnipeg. The special physical and financial requirements of buildings of this size minimize the possibility of short-term rental use given the demising and layout of them. There can be build lease situations that where a property is built specifically for a tenant on a sale leaseback basis, but typically the rents paid in those are typically a financing device rather than based on the cost of construction and the return required by the investor rather than on an arm's length indicator of market rent. So very few buildings of this nature in the market, very few occupants and or tenants out there. It makes it difficult to put value on it. So as mentioned, the data input into the city system is going to be very restricted. So let's move on to the analysis itself, page number 716 rather. While there are limited numbers of comps out there, we've done our best to gather those that are available that can give us some frame of reference in coming up with a rent. Again, this property, 215,000 as it sits on a separate roll number. Overall, we're looking at just under 500,000. The comps that we have are as shown, smallest being 48,000, certainly considerably smaller, running up to 286,000 square feet, or rather 355,000 square feet. They do range, obviously, in location as well as use. And we can just run through these briefly. There is a relatively recent lease at 1821 Wellington, that being by the airport. 2016 lease for 146,000 square feet, and it is simply storage inside, I believe. $2 per square foot rental rate for that facility. And we have a renewal and or new lease struck for the same tenant at 1093 Sherwin.
in 2016 at a rental rate of $2.95 a square foot for 175,000 square feet, 19-foot ceiling height there, original build date of 1964. That particular lease is a bump from $2.75 a square foot from their prior lease. That is a manufacturing facility as well as a bit of warehouse for the same single occupant. 1750 Inkster, $3.12 a square foot for a little over 100,000 square feet, 22-foot wall height. Located in Inkster. That's a multi-tenant building. Built in 1970. 1725 Sargent, we have $2.65 a square foot for a 2015 lease of a little over 100,000 square feet. And it goes onwards. We have a 2015 lease at 770 Pandora with a gross number of $6.45 a square foot. A net effective out of that of $2.85 a square foot. That for 286,000 square feet. That's a much more modern building, 20-foot warehouse, 20-foot ceiling height rather, than the subject. And then there's further ones that are a bit more dated on Kernahan, which was a large single occupant which has become multi-tenant over time, and you can see the lease rates applied there. So again, we're looking at this individual property at 215,000 square feet, part of a larger entity comprising 463,000 square feet. Tenants of this size and or owner occupants, they're really not tenants, are very limited. We have roughly the 4th or 5th largest industrial manufacturing facility in Winnipeg, behind the Buehler Versatile plant on Clarence. There's another DeFair property on Pandora, and there's a couple of others as well. But it's, suffice it to say, it's one of the larger production facilities in Winnipeg. So looking at this material, what's a fair rent for this particular property? Well, we've applied $3.25 a square foot based on the material that is available to us. If you look at the comps, generally they will all be significantly smaller than the subject itself. Vacancy. Vacancy stats are shown on page number 18. You can see investment vacancy in the city as a whole was at 7.3%, East Kildonan at 6.7%. The issue with regard to vacancy is when you look at an owner occupant, yes, they're the owner, they have the whole building. Are they utilizing the entire building all the time? No, typically they're not. They've gone through a cycle where they had a significant amount of time where they weren't using the full facility, and I believe to date they're not using the entire 400,000+ square feet for full production. Pardon me. The other aspect of that is when the property, when they vacate the property and it has to go on the market, how long does that process of time take for a 500,000 square foot building? Significant amount of time, because the conversion of it to any other use with such as multi-tenant, where you have to re-demise it, involves a significant investment of capital, very significant investment of capital. You have a very low land to plan area ratio, so it really works for one single occupant, not multiple occupants. So that period would take a while. We've applied a vacancy rate of 4%, which is in keeping with the other vacancy rates for industrial that we were looking at earlier. Our expense allowance is the same, the overall 7% as noted. And the shortfall allowance, we've applied $3.75 a square foot. If you, and I didn't do it in this particular valuation, but if you go through the actual operating costs for facilities of this size, typically they're going to be considerably higher than smaller properties. Given the amount of roof one would have to maintain, and there are just significantly greater expenses with property at this size. So, all of that considered, we come down to a net operating income on page 20 of $591,000. And see, that's an increase over the city's 2018 NOI of $536,000, but well under their $685,000 for this year. Capitalization rate, you again have all of the issues that I've described here make this a less than standard market acquisition. 463,000 square feet in the Winnipeg marketplace is not an attractive proposition either for conversion or other uses. Cap rate range that the city has is 5.5% to 9.8%. I've already discussed our other discussion of cap rate. We feel that a cap rate of 8.5% for the entire 55-125 furniture would be applicable. So this gives us a final market value of $6,961,000. And there's just the addendum materials have already been reviewed earlier, I believe. I'm open for questions.
Any questions?
So I just kind of want to cover what you said here. So you feel that this building should actually just be valued as one large building at over 500,000 square feet?
It is a single title, and if you follow the Municipal Assessment Act as described there, it states that it should be valued as a single property.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. I'm just wondering. I was doing some research. I couldn't find out why we have two different roll numbers on this building.
I'm not able to say either, unfortunately.
Okay. Do you know if the owners would want to initiate a merge or put them together, or is this?
I will discuss that with them, certainly.
Okay. Yeah, it's just kind of trying to figure out why. As well, I'm on to your page 16, your lease comparables. So you put 51 Atkins in at 48,000 square feet. Did you want to include that one because it's heavy manufacturing?
It was more because it was heavy manufacturing, yes. I should also note that tenant is no longer in that facility, and the property has traded since that time. So
Okay.
it's not my best comparable, but it was heavy manufacturing.
Okay, well, that being said, we recently went over mission of $4 a square foot. Now, why was that one not included on here, if it's heavy manufacturing as well?
It probably should be included at $4 as you mentioned. Again, we're looking at 120,000 square feet, so half the size of this one.
But you still included 48,000 square feet.
I did, yes. It was an omission, not on purpose.
Okay. Looking at 1725 Sergeant, just researched into it. It looks like that one's owner occupied. Should that be included for a rent?
The Atlas Graham?
Yeah, 1725.
1725.
Yeah, they have it as owner occupied, fully owner occupied.
I did do the research for that property as of that time frame, and it was to my knowledge, it was an arm's length lease at that time. I don't know if it's changed since then or if there's any new information that's available.
Okay. The Park and Flower, 1821 Wellington, that's a 20-year lease. Could that be why the rent's so low at $2?
Not quite sure I follow.
Well, it's just, it seems like that's your lowest one, but it's a 20-year lease. Could they maybe have gotten a lower rent due to the longer lease term?
I don't imagine they'd want to be stuck at $2 for 20 years necessarily, no. It may be slightly staged, but that they may have bumps that I'm not aware of later on, but it's certainly starting at $2 a square foot for the term that I've indicated. Sure.
Speaking of step-ups, you were talking about Sherwin, how it's stepped up. You had it on here twice. Are you aware it stepped up again to $3.15?
No, that must have occurred in 2018 after the reference date?
No, it's actually just before the reference date.
Just before,
Yeah,
okay.
March 1st, 2018.
March 1, let me note that down here.
Okay.
So that was $3.15 a square foot.
Correct.
For 175,000 square feet.
Yeah. And I think we already covered feet, but $4.50, not at $3.75 earlier with Mission.
Correct. Again, 108,000 square feet.
Okay, those are all my questions for the lease comparables. So for your capitalization rate, you applied an 8.5%. But the only evidence you supplied is between 6.5% and 7.25%.
The only direct evidence, yeah, it would be the comps that, and again, it's challenging, so presenting comps of, 10 to 40,000 square foot multi-tenant buildings is really not going to be comparable to the subject property. So I could put them out here and we could pick them apart and say, well, these don't apply, but the overriding thing that you're looking at here is the scale of the property and the attractiveness of that property in the marketplace. It would fall well outside the bounds of a normal investment grade property.
Okay, those are all my questions.
Thank you. Mr. Whitbread?
So for my edification, sir, page 11 of your report,
Yeah.
the photograph. Just want to clarify then, you were talking about 125 as the orange area,
Correct.
and 55 is the contiguous section also bracketed in kind of an orange color.
Correct.
And your presentation is that they should be valued as one property and in fact fall under one roll number. But am I to understand for the purposes of today's meeting, we're looking at 125 based on the information provided by the city?
It is currently divided into two roll numbers, so we have to treat it as such for today's valuation. As noted, it's a single title, and it would be normally under one assessment roll, and if it were bought on the market, it's a single title. You'd be looking at the purchase of the whole facility.
But you're clear that we are evaluating
I am, yes.
125. Okay, that's my question.
Mr. Upton?
And just a question, you used the vacancy of 4%. Why did you pick 4%? The building is not vacant in any sense, is it?
No, the building is not vacant as it is an owner occupant. We did briefly go over that. So you have a couple of issues there. One being equity. If you're looking at valuation of properties on the marketplace, they have to be treated in the same manner, so vacancy has to be applied whether it's a owner-occupied building or not. Two, is the entire building fully utilized? And certainly the Fair and other furniture manufacturers have gone through significant changes over the last decade where they've dramatically scaled back and then increased again their production. So the actual use of the building is typically not 100% of the facility that you're looking at. So to look at a vacancy rate of 4% in that fashion, matching what the other industrial properties that we're looking at are 4 to 5%, would certainly be fair. And then on sale, how long is it going to take for 500,000 450,000 square foot building to transact a very long time in our marketplace, given the structure that we're looking at.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. And the next matter on the docket is 55 Furniture Park.
The roll number is 040028720000, 55 Furniture Park. The assessed value is $10,023,000. It's excuse me, the actual year built is between 1963 and 1986, with wall heights ranging from 14 feet up to 25 feet. The zoning is M2 general manufacturing. The land area is 378,824 square feet. The gross floor, the leasable area is 253,422 square feet, and the land to find is 1.72. They are compliant. There's been no sale on the property. Again, we can take a quick look, although we have a fairly good idea of what this property now looks like. You can see some more elongated part of the property on page 8. You can see that like the different areas look like have been built up as we talked about with the years ranging from 1963 to 1986. Page 9 will give you another look at the property as well. Going back to the rent comparables on page 3, again they range from 2008 up to 2013. The lease terms range from 3 years all the way up to 14 years. The leased areas range from 100,000 square feet all the way up to 228,000. The wall heights range from 20 or 19 feet up to 34. The effective years built range from 1964 up to 1990, and the rents range from $3.63 per square foot up to $5. We can see that we have a total leasable area of 253,422 for a potential rent of 942,724. We're applying 2.5% vacancy, 2% expense, and an 8.75% cap rate to this one. Oh, sorry, for a estimated value of $10,023,000. This falls just outside of our 20th to 80th percentile. It falls on the lower or on the higher side. So if you look over at the industrial one to the left, you can see it falls between the 5.5 and the 9.8. So that encompasses our whole cap rate. The Municipal Assessment Act is on page 7. We feel this value is fair and equitable at $10,023,000. And should be confirmed. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Do you have questions?
Just a very few. We had briefly talked about the discrepancy in the leasable area. Did you get a chance to confirm the lower square footage for that? Internally there?
The leasable area too, yeah. I have not had a chance to confirm
Okay.
that, but
Okay, that's fine. The cap rate for this property, we're looking at 8.75% versus the last property where we were at, what was it, 7%? 7%.
yeah.
Okay. Sorry, give me for just a moment here. The rental rate that we're looking at for this is $3.72 per square foot. Okay, and in the 125 furniture, that was $343. Okay. 55 furniture is considerably older and choppier and lower ceilinged and so forth, but our rent is higher. It's also larger overall, but the rental rate is higher, I see. That's
Slightly higher.
That's what the model has spit out?
That's correct.
Okay. And again, nothing to do with you, but so the model has put a higher rent on a larger leasable area with lower ceilings and older construction.
It has put a higher rent on it, yeah.
Okay.
There is some obviously newer parts of it in 1986, but.
Okay. I won't, yes, that's fine. I won't ask the same questions again. Those are all of my questions.
Thank you, Mr. Whitbread.
Just confirming that I heard the weighted average rent, you used $3.17.
I'll just
Square
confirm
foot?
that right here.
372.
372.
372?
That's it.
Yeah, 372.
Okay, thank you. No further questions.
Mr. Upton,
No, I don't have any questions.
and nor do I.
Okay, great, thank you.
Please proceed.
So, 55 furniture, as described, part of the larger entity of 55 and 125 furniture, a little over 463,000 square feet in total. This is the older of the two roll numbers, if you want to consider it like that. Built between 1963 and 1986. It also has exceptionally low land to plan area ratio of 1.52 to 1. That's certainly minimal when it comes to an industrial facility. Page number 11 will give you the background in terms of the construction of the building. We're looking at 16 different sections of the building. As you can see, built between 1963 and 1986, and I'll just give you some statistics on that. To start with, I referred briefly to it. We had reached an agreement with City Winnipeg for the 2010-2011 assessment cycle. Based on City Winnipeg records indicating that the leasable area was 248,927 square feet. That excluded a basement area of 1,372 square feet. So the 248,927 was acknowledged. It's since been changed back for some reason. I guess it didn't get addressed internally or something. Of the 248,000 plus square feet, we have a total of 97,131 square feet with 16 foot or under wall height. So that's just under 100,000 square feet of under 16 foot wall height, 39.2% of the building. Total of 220,000 roughly square feet, 88% of the building was built prior to 1979, with 130,000 roughly square feet, 52% of the building built before 1974. So it is an older structure. There are some newer sections of it, but that does not change that the building is built in stages, and it's certainly less than optimal. You can see some photos of the interior here, as well as the exterior. There is some sections built with wood frame, wooden roof trusses, etc. You can see the heating. You can kind of see the linear nature of the building in terms of the layout. And again, just further areas of the internal indicating that it's a production facility. There is a small area of office as noted, and we have a picture of the vintage office components there at the bottom of page number 10. Same location as shown on pages 12 and 13. And we can move on to the valuation. I have already described all the material on 15 and 16. We have the same comparables on page number 17. However, we have a slightly older building with about 40% of the building under 16-foot wall height, certainly less than optimal for the majority of users in the market. We have utilized a rate of $3.15 a square foot on this 55 furniture, which is slightly lower than our rental rate for the 125 furniture. Again, it's also slightly larger if you treat them as single entities. To this, we've applied the same 4% vacancy, the overall 7% expense allowance, and we've gone with the $3.75 a square foot shortfall allowance. Again, typically, given the costs involved with these facilities, it would be higher than that, but in terms of arriving at an equitable valuation, we've used the $3.75. So our net operating income comes to $662,723. And I'm going to make a slight adjustment to my valuation here today. Rather than use the 8.75% cap rate that the city had used and that I had used in my original valuation here, I'm going to change that as we're treating the building as a whole. I'm going to match the cap rate for 125 furniture and use an 8.5% cap. That gives us a market value of $7,797,000 for 55 furniture.
Is that number again?
$7,797,000. And just one final point, if you flip back to my page number 3, you can see the appeal history of the property. I'm not sure if I addressed this on this one. You can see the range of values there going back to 2011. The 2018 assessment was reduced very slightly and is under appeal to the municipal board at $7,210,000. So our final valuation is $7,797,000 for the 2020 year. And I'm open for questions.
Mr. Assessor.
My first question is, can you just tell me again what you said the leasable area was?
Sure, it is, and this is from the city documentation that's available online for the areas. It is 248,927 square feet.
So these are all the same leases you have in place as 125?
They are, yes.
Okay, so we've already gone over those.
Yeah.
And again, just for your cap rate, do you have any direct evidence of how you calculated your revised cap rate at 8.5%?
Well, I made the reduction today based on treating it as a whole. Again, the overall, I could present our chart of significantly smaller cap rate. Smaller properties, generally multi-tenanted, but they would be particularly applicable.
Those are all my questions.
Thank you, Mr. Woodbred.
No, I'm fine, thank you.
Mr. Upton.
None from me, thank you.
I have no questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your patience.
I have to go find my parking meter.
Okay, go ahead.
The lot across the street, so